And I believe we should be live. Let me just check the stream here on YouTube. And yeah, please do give me a 1 in the comment if you guys are hearing me okay. Yeah, so good evening, voted. Thank you very, very much. I'm so grateful. Thank you. Yeah, yeah, man, the connection between atheism and Islam is definitely there, and there's definitely a link to the Gnostics, to the pagans, to pagan ways of thinking, to pagan philosophies. So there's certainly an overlap in the mind that is behind this. Daduza, welcome. Good chatting with you today. You never return as a horse. Welcome. So good to see you. And we have Villainous, and of course we have Dragon. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much for your support. Always appreciated. Yeah, guys. So it will be Christmas soon. So yeah, if greetings, Sergeant Grinch. Welcome, and yeah, I hope you guys are having a wonderful time, restful, safe, spending time with family, taking a break, and of course, in advance, I wish you guys a wonderful Christmas. I wish you a really happy New Year, great holiday run up to all of that. No push-ups again. Yeah, yeah, I was at gym last couple of weeks back, and I overdid it, hurt my elbow, so I've had to take a week out. Um, yeah, so you guys are all hearing me okay, right? There are no issues. Okay, just drop a 1 in the chat if all is okay. I'm going to assume that you guys can hear me all right. All right, so let me begin. Yes, excellent, guys. So let me begin. Let me jump over to the notes, and I'd like to finish, if I can, the discussion on atheism, especially in terms of its definitions, its history and definitions. Now, again, I'm getting constant pushback from atheists who want to flat out deny every single scholarly resource. What is interesting is that they want to force me to accept only their definition. So some random atheist comes on and says, I have to accept his definition. It's like some Muslims saying, I have to accept their definition of the Quran, their interpretation. And they will bluntly, flat out tell me what the scholars of academia have to say, what the top atheists in the world have to say, what all of the encyclopaedias and dictionaries have to say, are irrelevant relative to their personal feelings. So these are the people who are rational, reasonable, and people who follow the science. Now, I am following, I believe, the science. I'm simply showing what academia says. And you've got atheists who are denying every single source of evidence, flat out. This is no different to Abdulism. So, yeah, let me continue. So, guys, welcome. So, I've got a few sources I want to run through in advance. This is something very, very interesting. I will begin here. Are atheists trusted less than rapists? They are definition fluid. He never returned as a horse says, yes, they are extremely. And what you'll find is that this links back to Gnosticism, to Gnostic thinking. They would alter definitions to suit their particular purposes. So this is somehow referenced or tied to, linked to historically. Again, it's the same mind. There's so much to uncover in terms of atheism and the history of atheism. And of course, atheism in the beginning was a completely different thing. It's defined historically differently, but now within the Enlightenment period, or just prior to that, things changed. And this is when it became this particular anti-religious, anti-Christian doctrine. And atheists, of course, like Abdul's, don't want to go into their history. They don't want to accept the evidence from their own sources. They don't want to accept the evidence of their own scholars who founded their doctrines and belief. Yeah, hello, Mary Alex. And, well, there's a reason for this. Are atheists trusted less than rapists? And the answer is just barely, right? So notice here, distrust of atheists is well known, and this is actually an established fact, right? In terms of studies on this, atheists are not trusted, and for a long time have not been trusted. They're seen as a pernicious element within society, an untrustworthy element within society. So atheists are distrusted as much as, or possibly a bit more, than rapists. When presented with an apparently random person doing illegal and unethical things, few people were willing to identify the person as a Christian. More were willing to identify them as a Muslim, and the most were willing to identify them as a rapist or an atheist. So you can go to This Is Learned Religions. It's by Austin Klein, and atheists trusted less than rapists. So it should be easy for you to find this. Now, This was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. Do you believe in atheists? Distrust is central to anti-atheist prejudice. Well, I also have a distrust of men in women's underwear desperately wanting 2- and 3-year-olds to be sitting on their lap while they read to them. I also have a distrust of rabidly gay men who want young children to watch them march naked in the street during pride parades. I think we have a reasonable doubt here in terms of some of these things. There's certain overlaps here as well. Now, they mentioned here that someone who found a wallet on the sidewalk. So you guys can read this at your own time. But notice the researchers were looking to compare how often people committed the conjunction error with 4 groups. Now they want to call this, Christian, Muslim, rapist, or atheist. But notice this guy who takes this wallet and doesn't report it, doesn't give it back, right? Yet distrust groomers. There are groomers. We know there are groomers. Teacher and rapist, 46%, but atheist, 48%. So understand there's a connection here with people distrust. They think atheists are dishonest. Now, understand within religious groupings, people have a certain ideology. They have a certain value, certain rules, commandments, or strictures that one can generally rely upon. One knows that they lean this way, they follow these ideals, so generally they will conform to a certain set of rules. With atheists, you have no idea. This creates social distrust because it creates social uncohesion, I guess, to coin a phrase. So you have no idea what they believe because they've rejected the views and the values of the reigning society. Now, of course, there's also lots of contradiction there because atheists will happily tell you, or many atheists will tell you, that society decides its morals. Well, society has decided to be religious, and of course, then they are the immoral ones by default. So they need to they made the bed, they need to lie in it. He never returned his horses. I have a distrust of our president who, according to his daughter's diary, used to shower with her when she was 12 or thereabouts. I would have to agree with you. There's some questions there. And they do give less to charity, correct. Republicans, conservatives give far more to charity. How do you trust someone with no moral compass? Now, correct. Now, one can say that is based on the religious feeling, and therefore this is derived from that, that we have this. But then again, it's prevalent, it's rife in society that there's religious views. So, of course, therefore, we know what these religious views turn out in terms of the society they create, the culture they create. And atheists go against that. Okay, so that's this little article here. Then I'll jump over to this one. Global evidence of extreme intuitive moral prejudice against atheists. This is an article published 2017, and I'm going to go over to, so I'll jump over to my PDF to bring up this actual article, and this is here. Right, so this is global evidence of extreme intuitive moral prejudice against atheists, and this is Nature, right? The major scientific magazine or journal in the world, and this is Human Behavior. And this is a sample of, in 13 different countries, people in most of these countries viewed extreme moral violations as representative of atheists. I'll repeat that. People in most of these countries viewed extreme moral violations as representative of atheists. Now, of course, we can quite literally go into history, recent history, 20th century, and find extreme moral violations in atheist countries. There is no shortage of what we would consider moral violations in atheist countries. Notably, anti-atheist prejudice was even evident among atheist participants around the world. And the recent rise in secularism in Western countries has not overwritten intuitive anti-atheist prejudice. Entrenched moral suspicion of atheists suggests that religion's powerful influence on moral judgments persists even among non-believers in secular societies. Now, of course, one can accept that on the face of it. However, one can also say that if, according to the religious belief, we are in the imago Dei, right, as the Catholics would say, we are born in the image of God, or created in the image of God, made in the image of God. Therefore, these moral beliefs are part and parcel of our human existence, part and parcel of our inherent makeup, and thus they're going against that. I have never liked Ravi Zacharias. Ravi Zacharias. I watched him once in a talk, and he said some things I kind of thought were okay, and then there were things I thought he was waffling, and there were things he said that he just turned me right off. And anyway, so notice, speculation about whether morality depends on religious belief has a long history. The Chinese philosopher Mozi claimed that belief in ghosts was essential for moral restraint. Okay, fine and well. In Plato's Euthyphro, Socrates debated whether morality can even be properly defined without reference to divine preference, because then you have to have some kind of divine moral law as a standard, as opposed to personal human opinion. Now, of course, we're dealing with atheists providing personal human opinion, their opinion. How is their opinion greater than yours? Well, because they're scientific and you're a religious bigot. That's pretty much their definition. Dostoevsky famously questioned whether moral prohibitions could carry weight without belief in a deity. So this is not a question of today. This is a question that's been going on for centuries, right? For thousands of years. And Dostoevsky wrote many books about, and he wrote some very profound stories about how these lack of beliefs in God, because obviously he was in Russia, and he saw what the lack of belief, what godlessness brought to society. Marian Grand Bruheim, welcome. Katie Nagurski, thank you. Welcome very much. Good to see you all here. And so modern investigations reflect this perceived link between belief in God and morality, as recent small sample studies in North America suggest deep moral suspicion of individuals who do not believe in God. And of course, prejudice, okay, against atheists may persist even in secular cultures because we link belief to within-group cooperation. So now so what you create is people who go against the group, and therefore you cannot trust them. You don't know what they believe. So anti-atheist prejudice remains globally prevalent, even in secular societies and among atheists. Because atheists know what you are supposed to believe if you're a Christian. But what do atheists believe? Well, I mean, at the moment, men can fall pregnant. That's an atheist belief. That is definitely not a Baptist belief. Now, religious beliefs is intuitively viewed as a necessary safeguard against the temptation of grossly immoral conduct. What is your external crime and punishment? Exactly. Yes, blacklisted. So what is your standard? What overarching eternal standard do you have? Because according to atheists, they'll just say, well, the science has changed. Kitty diddling is bad today, but good tomorrow. It's bad here, but good there. Right? So really, because if society makes that decision, well, and they are trying to change society, so yeah, the might makes right. So this just leads to utter chaos. So atheists are broadly perceived as potentially morally depraved and dangerous. Viewed differently, people perceive belief in a God as a sufficient moral buffer to inhibit immoral behavior. Because if there is no God and there is no punishment, well, then what stops you? Okay, this goes back to what we discussed previously on Voltaire. Right? People want to claim he's a deist, but his own words, he says, there is no God. He's an atheist. But don't tell my servant lest he kill me at night. Because he realizes the concept of eternal punishment, of hell, is a restraint on people because they believe they are serving God, they're doing good, they're following an eternal moral law. And yep, wanted to raise that. Now, of course, another atheist commented on my videos today, and they constantly want to blame the Catholic Church for framing atheism as immoral, for defining atheism as an attack on Christianity, for framing atheism as an attack on religion, as opposed to just having a lack of beliefs. Now, here's the thing. Atheists are by default materialists. Materialism, by default, by implication, rejects spirituality, rejects the immaterial. Now, of course, God is spirit. God is immaterial. So therefore, their frame of reference, their worldview, automatically rejects. It has considered and rejected the immaterial, the spiritual. So therefore, they cannot claim to have a lack of belief. They've already made up their mind on God. So this is merely just a bunch of sophistry, a bunch of lies. Now, feel free if you would want to point out to me where the atheist Bible states thou shalt not lie, because that does not exist, right? So yeah, hold on, best on the whole internet. Thank you very much, JTK's World. Clayton says, yep, and that is how they attempt to criticize certain people for wrongdoing when they know their Christian beliefs. That can't be done with atheists because they have no higher authority. Correct. So how do you criticize them, right? So yeah, that's so notice. So now they want to claim that the Catholic Church is responsible for putting a false label on atheists who are just, because it's religion of peace, because they're people of peace. They have no beliefs. You say because they have no beliefs, they're pure. They are untainted by any toxic sort of doctrine, of course. Now we're dealing with Baron de Holbach. This is a 1914 book. And let me just go to the top here so we can get the title. It's by Max Pearson Cushing on Baron de Holbach. And this book happens to be called Baron de Holbach, a study of 18th century radicalism in France. Because, as you know, atheists are not radicals. This is the most famous modern atheist. This is the guy who kicked off the whole modern atheist movement, popularized it, as it were. Now, of course, they don't want to believe that they have their prophets and their, they're their founders, but yeah, they certainly do. And I just want to mention a short passage from this. Now, it states here that in this book, which is a work studying the life and the comments, oh my gosh, what just happened here, of Baron Holbach. Just bring that up. Yeah, I just found this book like an hour ago. So, right. So this is submitted in partial fulfillment of the requirements of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the Faculty of Political Science, Columbia University. So you'll find this some incredible information in theses that were written and submitted. You can find fantastic dissection of various historical things in publications like this. So let me just go back here. Sadly, a lot of this references the original French, and it's a lot of quotes in French, so which is inaccessible to us if we don't study French, if we don't know French. You can see this whole passages in French, long sections. But he says the following study proposes to deal with this attack on religion that preceded and helped to prepare the French Revolution. So, and this is by Baron de Holbach, right? This is the first atheist, the first famous modern atheist who laid the groundwork, right? This man was violently opposed to Christianity, violently opposed to Christian doctrine, to the Catholic Church, to all Christian doctrine and all churches, in fact. So, so he attacked Christianity. I've quoted him before in this show. He violently, I mean, in terms of his rhetoric at least, but also ultimately, he and Voltaire and others, with their comments, incited violence in the French Revolution. Remember, this was the first atheistic state, which was irrational, violent, murderous, genocidal. Similar phenomena are by no means rare in the annals of history. 18th century atheism, however, is of special interest, standing as it does at the end of a long period of theological and ecclesiastical disintegration and prophesying a reconstruction of society on a purely rational and naturalistic basis. Now, what is interesting is that atheists claim that only the five senses that we have, man is the measure of all things, that everything is materialistic. This idea of materialism in science, of materialistic science, of everything only being materialistic, goes back again to the 5th century BC, 6th century BC, especially to Epicurus, the Greek philosopher. So again, these atheists, these scientists who are proposing to us this scientific idea, are literally proposing Greek paganism as the epitome of modern day science, as the only view of the world, as if we haven't moved on a little bit in the last 4,500 years, right? It's now 2022. These guys are going back to 2500 BC and saying, oh yeah, the views of those pagan atheist philosophers of 2500 BC, yeah, that stuff is science. So this is quite literally what they're saying. They are literally repeating the ideas of pagans and going, that's science. I'd say that's open to some question. Now, the anti-theistic movement has been so obscured by the less thoroughgoing tendency of deism and by subsequent romanticism that the real issue in the 18th century has been largely lost from view. So this is just a comment on de Holbach, who was clearly anti-theistic, anti-Christian, which, according to the idea that if the satanic, right, according to the Jewish meaning, is to oppose God, then this is satanic. It is in opposition to God. So it is crazy that atheists want to come and tell me that the Catholic Church created this false view of atheism as being in opposition to the opposite and the contradictory of theism, where it's really just a religion of peace, right? That's just a religion of peace. Check the atheist Quran for that proof, right? When atheists themselves, the founders of modern atheism themselves, were incredibly anti-theistic. Okay, so any comments or questions? Have I missed anything? I then want to go on to another article, and then we'll continue from here. Let me just find, this is where I got up to last time. So let me see if there's anything. So maybe the atheists have a rule where you can't lie unless it's for war, for relationship with your spouse, or to make peace with others. Exactly. Atheism and morality like oil and water. Yeah, now even the Catholic Church within its doctrine states that even atheists can be reasonably moral and live reasonably moral lives, right? Without any particular attachment to the church. But again, according to Christian doctrine, this is because we are made in the image of God. And two, these people are technically Christian atheists. They've been steeped in, they've been raised in a Christian world. So their world that they live in was shaped by Christian morals and Christian values. The world was utterly different prior to that. So Christianity remade how we view society. Okay, now to this. I want to go to, this is anti-religion. This is Wikipedia, so we'll take it for what it is. But notice, I asked a question previously, and I haven't yet received an answer, and I've put it on my Facebook as well, but how do we legitimately distinguish between the mandated propaganda of atheism of the Marxist-Leninist states of the Soviet Union, of all the communist states of the 20th century? And in fact, remember, Marx and Lenin especially, and Stalin after him, mandated that the communist parties, the socialist parties, all the socialists have to promote the propaganda of atheism. So how do we distinguish between the standard rhetoric of atheism versus the communist propaganda, where the communists are promoting the propaganda of atheism? How do we make a separation between the two? And I'd love an atheist to tell me, and of course they won't. And because the two are identical. The two overlap completely. They're identical. Now, let's have a look at this. An early form of mass anti-religion was expressed during the Age of Enlightenment. Now, of course, we can go, well, Wikipedia is not true. Well, we'd have to have a look at that. But we've looked at it, and we know for a fact modern atheism started, according to several references, and historically we can trace it, to the Age of Enlightenment, and then expressed violently, extremely violently, genocidally in the French Revolution, and again going on into the 20th century, which was the rise of the atheist states. As early as the 17th century, Baron de Holbach's book, Christianity Unveiled, published in 1761, attacked not only Christianity but religion in general as an impediment to the moral advancement of humanity. According to historian Michael Burley, anti-religion found its first mass expression of barbarity in revolutionary France as organized irreligion, as an anti-clerical, that's anti-priest, right, and self-styled non-religious state, and it responded violently to religious influence over society. So atheism is apparently going to, as atheists tell us, to stop war. It's going to bring peace. What it brought was genocide. What it brought was murder. What it brought was violence, civil war, irrationality, and of course the worship of cultic gods, quite bluntly. They simply replaced Christianity with their own depraved, immoral, sexual escapades and belief in the god of reason, the Roman god of reason. So Villain says, I think we will soon be seeing a non-Christianese atheism in the West soon. The gender hysteria is just a toe dip. Yeah, the thing is, man, how far can you stretch that rubber band? Because this gender hysteria is obviously by atheists, right? It's again, it's the reversal of the biblical view, right? God made men and women. So, yeah. Also, I should mention that, for instance, now again, this is the logical extension of atheism, when someone says that I am gender non-conforming, right? We have men and women. Okay, atheism claims to be logical. It claims to be entirely rational and based on nothing but logic. This is a lie, because we know that the crazies are atheists. Logic has three basic foundations, right? Three basic laws. The first is the law of identity. The second is the law of non-contradiction. So just look at those. And the third one is the law of the excluded middle. But let's have a look. The law of identity. P is P. P is not Q. Non-contradiction. P cannot be Q. Q cannot be A. A is not S. Each one has its own identity. A horse is not a dog. A dog is not a cat. A cat is not a rabbit. That's identity. Now we have identity politics. You've got people claiming to be one thing when they're another. I'm a man, but I identify as a woman. This is a war on identity, because identity is literally the very first law of logic. So it is an attack on logic. Atheism has now, in its irrationality, launched an attack on logic, on the utter foundation of logic. This is the irrationality of atheism. Atheism must own this. Atheists need to own this. Now, let's continue. The Soviet Union adopted the political ideology of Marxism-Leninism, and by extension the policy of state atheism. Now, in the years of 1920 to 1950, apparently 15 million Christians were killed in the Soviet Union. Some Hi, I'm a warrior. What did you miss? Just go back to the beginning and simply play it at like 1.75 speed or something. I usually just play at 1.5 or 1.75 speed to catch up. So, from 1921 to 1950, some 15 million Christians were killed in the Soviet Union by atheists. By atheists, remember. And some say 20 million. So the numbers vary, but that's at least that number. Now, at least 106,300 Russian clergymen were executed between 1937, let me just run down here, between 1937 and 1941. The People's Republic of Albania had an objective for the eventual elimination of all religion in Albania, because it's going to bring peace, right? Because these are atheists, right? Yeah, just a mere misunderstanding. He never returned as a horse. Yes, just a slight misunderstanding. We just murdered those 15 million Christians and 100,000 plus priests because it was Tuesday and we didn't know what to do with ourselves. In Albania, they had an objective for the eventual elimination of all religion in Albania with the goal of creating an atheist nation, exactly like the French Revolution was supposed to do, which it declared in 1967. In 1976, Albania implemented a constitutional ban on religious activity and actively promoted atheism. The government nationalized most religious property and so on. Many clergy and theists were tried, tortured, and executed, exactly like what happened in the French Revolution, the world's first atheist state. Now, what is the distinction here between atheist practice in the French Revolution by the founders of modern atheism versus the atheist practices of the Soviets? What is the difference? How do we make a distinction? Can someone please detail that? Because obviously we must be able to say, well, the Soviet atheism was this, because you see, atheists today practice scientific atheism. It should also be noted that the Soviets also practiced scientific atheism. Marx was a scientific atheism. Lenin, Stalin were scientific atheists. Your modern atheist skeptic is a scientific atheist, but it's different science. It's different, I assure you. Now, clergy and theists were tried, tortured, and executed. All foreign Roman Catholic clergy were expelled, and Albania officially tried to eradicate religion. Authorities in the People's Republic of Romania aimed to move towards an atheistic society in which all religion would be considered as the ideology of the bourgeoisie. Again, that is a Marxist move. It's bourgeoisie, family is bourgeoisie, and the whole concept of family has to be abolished because it's a bourgeoisie concept. Religion is bourgeoisie. So now we do know that atheists, if you take guys like Richard Dawkins, who are very anti-religious, who don't believe that atheism is merely a lack of belief, Sham Harris, these are famous atheists. Are they doing atheism wrong? Are they not real atheists because they don't believe that? And then, of course, some atheists are going to come along. Well, I don't care what they do. I care what I do. Well, we don't care. You don't represent all atheism. You're one person. What about the rest of you? Right? Who is an authority? Where's the orthodoxy? What are we supposed to believe? If everyone just believes whatever is convenient for him at the time to save him from embarrassment from the facts, then yeah, you guys are just lying to me. So when atheism dumps the Christianese, what moral system will be left? Satanism. Villainous. Satanism will be left. So now they wanted to fight superstition and mysticism. Now we have all heard, for instance, I've heard, and I mean, she was a nice person. I was on her channel, but she is a humanist, and we'll be discussing the next series I will do will be humanism. Right? Next day I'll start on humanism, and humanism is an atheist sort of form of morality. It's a whole framework for morality, and humanism is specifically an atheist religion. It was started explicitly as a religion. It is a religion. Of course, I've heard Nuria say, well, I'm a humanist. I'm not religious. I believe in science. Well, humanism was started specifically and explicitly as a religion, ripped off from the Catholic Church, and simply stripping out the deity and then going, here is our new religion, our man-made religion. Quite literally a man-made religion. So, yeah, that's atheism, man-made religion. So they wanted to fight superstition and mysticism, and atheists happen to call religion the same thing. So do the communists. So how do we distinguish between communist propaganda and atheist propaganda? How do we distinguish between the scientific atheism of regular atheists and the scientific atheism of murderous communists? Can we make a distinction? Can someone give me a list of differences, please? And initiated an anti-religious campaign aimed at reducing the influence of religion in society. So there you go. So that's that. And then finally, on this one is from McGill University in Canada. Atheism is the disbelief in the existence of God. It is commonly defined as positive denial of theism, the assertion that deities do not exist. or the deliberate rejection of theism, the refusal to believe in the existence of deities. Now, I don't know, the Catholic Church didn't write this. I'm pretty sure the university is probably not a Catholic university. This doesn't seem to be. And they've got Baron de Holbach here, and he was one of the first self-described atheists. He did not believe in the existence of any deities, right? Now, what is interesting is that most atheistic philosophers define atheism as the simple absence of belief, thereby designating agnostics and people who have never heard of gods, such as unchurched or newborn children, as atheists. So this is like the Islamic belief that everyone is born a Muslim. Well, everyone's an atheist. Okay, so they want to expand their numbers. Greetings from the Netherlands, Thomas. Welcome. So, yeah, and then one or two small points here. In early ancient Greek, the adjective atheos, right, from God, meant godless. Now, of course, atheists like to promote the idea that it means without God, just a lack of belief, just this empty void. We've never thought about anything. Now, if you've never thought about pink elephants, right, that's great. But until you're exposed to it, then you have to make some kind of decision about it. So you can claim that a newborn child is an atheist because they've never thought about it. Maybe they can't think at that point, they're too young. But once they've been exposed to the idea, a thought has to form. So you cannot claim that you have had no thought or have no thought about something that you've finally been exposed to, right? Because then you're refusing to think about it. That's a choice you're making. Now, the word acquired an additional meaning in the 5th century BC, severing relations with the gods, that is, denying the gods, ungodly. So notice here, even though we have atheos, without God, people say it's just without God. It's just a blank space in my mind. Notice here, there is this definition that it means you denied them, right? So originally, it was simply used as a slur for godlessness. So notice, even then, back in the day, the godless were considered to lack a moral basis, to go against the current of society. Atheism was first used to describe a self-avowed belief in late 18th century Europe, specifically denoting disbelief in the Christian God. So yeah, I'll just leave that over there for the moment. So yes, so again, we have confirmation of the confirmation that atheism was specifically a doctrine created at that period in time to deny God and to replace God, to destroy the church, literally destroy it, and it led to the French Revolution. So let me continue from where we left off last time. So I should have, let me see, about 20 slides or more. I hope so. Let me make sure, I guess I started from the right place. Negative theology. So we did the Freemasons, we did the Broad Dictionary of Religion. Okay, so let me start here, and we'll continue. So, any comments or questions? Have I missed anything? Too many humanoids have had zero thoughts since birth. Yeah, that is very much true, Sergeant Grange. Okay, so thanks for sitting with me through that. That was just the run-up to this. So let's go back into the slides now. So hopefully I'll try to finish this today, but not guaranteed. I will continue next week. I guess it'll be a quiet week. I'll be here, so once I come back. And okay, so again, back to Baron de Holbach, the first modern atheist. Right? He inspired Dawkins and Marx. So he wrote in a book called Good Sense Without God, or Free Thoughts Opposed to Supernatural Ideas. Free thought that are opposed. I thought it's just a lack of belief, but apparently that's in opposition to. So even he defines it. Now what's crazy is Baron de Holbach tries to tell us these ideas are simply just a lack of belief. But of course he tells us here it's in opposition to. His own writings, in his own works, he contradicts his own definitions. He contradicts himself, which is typical of all of the atheists. But we've covered that at length before. So the more men are deficient in knowledge and reason, the more zealous they are in religion. So in other words, the dumber you are, the less you have any kind of rational faculties, the more religious you become. So this is an attack on religion. Now we've mentioned other quotes by this guy before. He's very much anti-religious, right? He's made some pretty nasty comments about religion. And he says, every man who reasons soon becomes an unbeliever. For reason shows that theology is nothing but a tissue of chimeras, that religion is contrary to every principle of good sense, that it tinctures all human knowledge with falsity. So religion brings falsehood. The sensible man is an unbeliever because he sees that far from making men happier, religion is the chief source of the greatest disorders and the permanent calamities with which man is afflicted. So religion is the source of all of man's problems. Marx said this, Lenin said this, Sam Harris said this, and I believe Dawkins has said very similar things. Now, of course, they just lack belief. They don't have any actual beliefs. And of course, here they are telling us the beliefs that they don't have. Now, if an atheist does pop up, please don't provide any comment. You don't have an opinion. You don't have beliefs. You don't think anything, right? Because you've never thought about it. You have nothing to contribute because you don't have any thoughts on the subject, because you lack belief. You have not thought about it. You don't know anything about it. You understand? So don't say anything. I'll just mute you because that is your view. Nothing to say. So thank you, Adult Cole. Thank you very much. Yeah, welcome. So Frank Villardo, Lloyd, what do you think about the language located within the DNA helix? DNA is a logical sequence of sophisticated three-dimensional code. It is the operating system of all forms of life. So DNA is, I mean, yeah, this is not some question I was prepared for, but DNA, language did not exist prior to, language exists in a mind. If all existence is just material, then, and language exists, if language, so look, we know that words, if we see words on a page, if we see words that have order, we know that that order, that rationality, those thoughts, that language, that structure, that logic came from a mind, right? So how does this kind of thing that is like, that is inherently non-material, this kind of logical structure of a 3.5 billion word sequence, how does that happen by accident? So language must exist in a mind. DNA also has to, someone had to have programmed this. Now, of course, there are a few more complicated things. I can do a talk about this another time because I'm going to get things wrong if I just talk off the cuff. But do understand that within DNA, even though you have 3.5 billion words, right, written in a very, very long sequence, you also happen to have sections that overlap and sections that you can actually take sections that, you have sections that finish, but there are sections that overlap and there are sections that have double meanings. So there are ways to actually, it's effectively in portions, it's encrypted, it's ciphered. There are multiple layers of meaning. This is a complexity that can only come from, as we know today, modern cryptography. So this requires mathematics, this requires cryptographers. How this arose by accident, through random chance, through random accident, is impossible. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about how these immaterial things came about from a material world. How does language arise from chemicals bumping together, from atoms smashing together in your brain? It doesn't make sense. So yeah, it's all mathematical. Yeah, correct. So now, so yeah, mathematics had to, yeah, anyway, that's a discussion. That's a different topic for another time. Is there a cause in a person to produce an atheist? Is maybe the desire to follow the sinful heart not be? I would agree, Green Eagles, that would be a reasonable conclusion to draw. Also, many atheists apparently were psychologically abandoned by their fathers. They didn't have a father to look after them, to protect them, to look up to, so they became self-reliant, self-sufficient. So apparently there's, in many of these famous atheists, there's this sort of psychological impetus that also one can tie to that. So yeah, so Frank, let's get back on topic here, right? So, okay, right. So now we know that Baron de Holbach has a very negative, we've mentioned multiple quotes from this guy. So, yeah, the language of God is mathematics, not Arabic, but the Muslims will argue with you on that. So, yeah, we know that Baron de Holbach hates Christianity, hates the Bible, hates the church, and he lacks belief, right? And now, Marx and Lenin, Criticism of Religion, via Lenin, okay, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Religion, 1905, that's his book on religion. Atheism is a natural and inseparable part of Marxism, of the theory and practice of scientific socialism. Marx and Engels always called themselves materialists. Now that's fantastic. So modern atheists are also materialists. So how do you differ from Marx? As early as 1844, Marx coined the phrase, the criticism of religion is the beginning of all criticism. The criticism of religion leads to the doctrine according to which man is, for man, the supreme being. Doctrine, interesting, doctrine is what the church teaches. Doctrine, church doctrine, Catholic doctrine, Baptist doctrine, Anglican doctrine, you pick your church, right? Therefore, it reaches the categorical imperative of overthrowing all relationships in which man is a degraded, enslaved, abandoned, contemptible being. In other words, religion makes you a degraded, enslaved, abandoned, contemptible being. This is entirely in opposition to the view that man is made in the image of God. Therefore, we are worth everything. Therefore, we have value. Of course, we've looked at atheists who simply state that man has no inherent value. Man is just chemicals, right? You have no value. You have no human rights. You have no God-given rights. So this again goes in against the concept of God, which means it is therefore satanic. Religious misery is at once the expression of real misery and a protest against it. So religious misery is the expression of real misery. So if you are following a religion, you are allowing misery into your life. You are truly miserable. And you are also therefore angry at religion. So this is just propaganda. This is the propaganda of communist atheism, right? This is the propaganda of atheism by the communists. Does this differ in any substantial way from the propaganda of, 21st century modern atheists? Can you show me a distinction where we can say, oh yeah, clearly this is the accurate, true, scientific view of regular atheists, and this is the false view of these commies? Because the difference is a little hard to tell what it is, right? Religion is the groan of the oppressed, the sentiment of a heartless world, and at the same time the spirit of a condition deprived of spirituality. It is the opium of the people. That's interesting. We always get told religion is the opium of the people without providing the rest of the quote. This is an attack on religion. Baron de Holbach was attacking religion. All of these Enlightenment thinkers were attacking religion, right? You had Sartre, you had lots of these guys. We've spoken about Voltaire attacking religion. Now you've got Marx saying the very same thing. So how are they different? Now, the suppression of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is the premise of its real happiness. It is first and foremost the task of philosophy, operating in the service of history, to unmask self-alienation in its profane forms after the sacred form of human self-alienation has been discovered. So what alienates man and from himself? Well, religion. So this has to be removed. This has to be stripped out of society. And thus, criticism of heaven is transformed into criticism of the earth. Criticism of religion into criticism of law, and criticism of theology into criticism of politics. This is Marx, Introduction to the Critique of the Hegelian Philosophy of Public Law. Now, of course, we've mentioned a couple of slides ago, previous show, that Hegel believed that if the facts contradicted his theory, the facts had to go. So he said, right, when the facts contradict his theory, umso schlimmer die Fakten, right? So much worse for the facts. So Hegel, who influenced Marx, who created the idea of the dialectic, as discussed in the previous show, their belief is that when the facts go against my theory, the facts have to go. So Marx denounced his own philosophy of dialectical limits when he was older. Marxism reduces all people to the level of inhumane. If you move against the beliefs of the state, then you are evil. I don't think he denounced anything. The man was satanic. He wrote satanic poetry. He wrote a satanic play. The man would recite satanic mantras. The guy was insane. So yeah, let's continue. Charles Darwin. So now we're going to talk a little bit about Charles Darwin. I've never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of a God. He may have said that, but in practice, remember, Voltaire was a deist, but Voltaire's own words, he was very much an atheist in his own words. You look at someone like Carl Sagan, who claimed to be an agnostic. When you read books about him by people close to him, or read quotes and interviews from people close to him, they state the man was pretty much an atheist, right? He had very negative views on religion. So in public, he might have said he was an agnostic, but in practice, he was very much an atheist. Maybe he was demonized. Now, to be quite honest, his father, numerous people around him, numerous people who knew Marx, believed that he was demon-possessed. Even Engels said that when you looked in his eyes, you saw 10,000 demons. This is odd for people who are atheists, who are talking in this language, but his father was religious, and of course Marx was originally religious, but Bruno Bauer turned him into this rabid atheist. But, he had very strong satanic imagery in his writings. Now, this is Charles Darwin's letter to Reverend J. Fordyce, July 7th, 1879. But don't forget, being an atheist was considered a slur, right? It was a pejorative, so they wouldn't necessarily admit to it, even if they were one. So facts need to go. Sounds like the use of science to prove evolution, selective of any results that prove your pre-existing conclusion. Correct. Very much so. This was Hegel's philosophy, and this is the philosophy that unfortunately underpins a lot of the atheist scholars, the atheist philosophers, the atheist prophets. Okay, so yeah, Darwin said a lot of dumb things. In fact, there was a fantastic thing. He mentioned a bear can turn into a whale. And he had that in I think the 1879 edition of his book, and he removed it in the 1880 edition because he realized he couldn't prove that. He realized there was no way he could actually prove that. So he had to strip that idea of a bear turning into a whale from his book, right? Yeah. So Darwin had little use for established religions. He thought that they were authoritarian and discriminated against those who did not accept them. He was never an outright atheist, however. Okay, fine. Well, let's just take that on board. Let's just take it at face value for now. His statements on religion by Barlow in 1958 suggest that he was a deist. Well, so was Voltaire, but Voltaire was an atheist. They lie about Voltaire. Like many cultured Englishmen of his time, Wilson, 2002, and the American Founding Fathers, okay? So he was a deist like many cultured Englishmen of his time, so according to these historians, right? And the American Founding Fathers. Well, the thing is they lie about the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers were mostly religious. Christians, quite bluntly. That's a story for another time. That's a set of slides I have to finish up, but I've spoken about that in the last month or so. He accepted the presence of some kind of creator, but avoided the words Christ, Savior, or Redeemer. Okay, maybe he believed that Satan made the war. Who knows? Maybe he meant that Cthulhu did it. Who knows? Right? Yeah. So Frank, can we not talk about the whole? Let's just not get too distracted with some of these other things, right? So Darwin could not conceive how the universe could have been the result of blind chance and necessity. All this must have had a first cause with an intelligent mind in some degree analogous to that of man. That's fantastic. So the story of Darwin seems to have a lot of atheists trying not to push the idea that Darwin actually had a religious bent, apparently. At one time he did. Of course, his daughter died, and then, of course, he changed. Right? Right. So, nevertheless, like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and others, Darwin did not identify with any religious denomination in traditional terms. Now, of course, I'm just simply quoting what the sources I've been looking at are saying. This is not necessarily true. Understand, the story of the Founding Fathers is often largely propagandistic, again, to suit atheist propaganda. Now, after the death of Darwin's 10-year-old daughter, Annie, he lost his faith in providence. This is the idea that everything is divinely ordained for the best, as many have done after similar tragedies. As he grew older, questions of religion simply ceased to interest him. According to Barlow, Desmond, and Moore. Oh, by the way, the question was, how do atheists become atheists? Most atheists seem to be created at school by atheistic teachers, which is the intention of a lot of the American education system. It was designed like that by the founder of the modern founder of the American modern educational system, who I have mentioned before and I will touch on again in the near future. And also at universities try their best to strip that out of Christians and turn them into atheists. The deathbed conversion story of Darwin is a myth that was started by a profiteering woman who never actually met Darwin, as far as can be told. That's Moore in 1944. So apparently he never converted to Christianity. The legend is still repeated by fundamentalist Christian preachers and radio hosts, which prompted Darwin scholar James Moore to write his book, The Darwin Legend. So apparently he did not convert to Christianity. So that's just something I wanted to mention here. This is the book, The Darwin Legend, by James Moore. Now, Charles Darwin, ambiguity. So many scholars believe Charles Darwin was an agnostic or even an atheist. But now, here they're trying to notice there's this letter here on the right. So, again, propaganda. I want to have a look at that. So, this is a letter that he wrote. And it doesn't say what this article says it says. So, it can be difficult to find hard evidence to back up those beliefs. He was reluctant to discuss religion, and his writings are often silent on the issue. Now, a simple, one-sentence, handwritten letter signed by the naturalist offers proof he did not believe in God. The letter, written 21 years after the publication of The Origin of Species, was auctioned off Monday afternoon at Bonham's in New York. It fetched nearly $200,000, 3 times the previous record for a 4-page letter that Darwin had penned to his niece. Darwin's letter is a reply to a young barrister named Francis McDermott, who wrote in 1880, "If I am to have the pleasure in reading your books, I must feel that at the end I shall not have lost my faith in the New Testament. My reason in writing to you, therefore, is to ask you to give me a yes or no to the question, do you believe in the New Testament?" Very interesting. He continues by promising not to publicize Darwin's reply in theological papers. Darwin responds the next day, "Dear sir, I am sorry to have to inform you that I do not believe in the Bible as a divine revelation, and therefore not in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. Yours faithfully." And he kept his word of not publishing this letter, and the letter was unknown to scholars for over 100 years. Now, does this definitively prove that Darwin was an atheist? No, but it certainly, I believe, leans in that direction. So Darwin lost his faith, and he does not believe in the Bible. He doesn't believe in Jesus. So does it make him a deist? Well, those are questions that we need to ask. But Darwin inspired Marx. Darwin inspired Hitler. Darwin inspired, even before Hitler, he inspired the Germans well prior. Even in the late 1800s, he inspired genocides by the Germans, by the fathers of the people that became the Nazis. I know someone who had a family member die and became an atheist. He said he did not believe in God, but clearly believed in a God he could hate and blame. Of course, that much is true. Atheists are often very angry at God. So the meaning of the death of God. There are several kinds of atheism, according to the Baker Encyclopedia of Christian Apologetics. The traditional atheist believes that there is not now, nor ever was, a God. That's a traditional atheist. See Feuerbach, Bach, Ludwig, Freud, Sigmund, Sartre, and Jean-Paul. Right, certain philosophers that have a traditional atheism, there's no, nor ever was a God. Darwin lost his young daughter. Yeah. The semantical atheists assert that the term God is dead, that religious language has no meaning. That's agnosticism. Okay, great. The mythological atheists, of whom Nietzsche is representative, affirm that the myth of God was once alive, but died in the 20th century. Okay, great. So that's apparently Nietzsche. Great stuff. Conceptual atheists believe that there is a God, but that is hidden from our view, being obscured by our conceptual constructions. Buber, Martin. The practical atheists contend that God exists, but we should live as if he does not. Not using God as a crutch for our failure to act in a spiritual and responsible way. This is sprouting faster than genders. Althusser was a dialectical atheist. These held that God actually once lived, but then died in our century. None of that makes sense to me. So, yeah. Frank Villardo says you can be a scientist, still believe in God even more. All the universities were created by the Catholic Church. What we have comes from the Church Fathers, Lemaitre, the Big Bang. And yeah, so yeah, of course, the whole scientific revolution is on the basis of Christian theology and Christian thinking, right? Now, Hegel notoriously maintained that if facts contradict theory, then umso schlimmer für die Fakten, so much the worse for the facts. This can be seen as indicative of paramount arrogance of a philosophy that takes no notice of such trivialities as empirical data. I mention this here because Hegel influenced a lot of these people. And he was the guy who created the idea of the dialectic that Marx and others followed, right? So this whole dialectic, this is from a guy that couldn't care less about facts. Thomas Huxley, duck-faced man, this dude. So about 150 years ago, Thomas Huxley, who died in 1895, and members of a group called the X Club effectively hijacked science into a vehicle to promote materialism, which is atheism. Materialism and atheism are effectively one and the same. It's a rejection of anything material, right? Immaterial. This is the philosophy that everything we see is purely the result of natural processes, which is, like I mentioned, this is Epicurean. This is Epicurus, the 4,500 years ago, the Greek pagan philosophy. So yeah, let's just go back to pagan Greece because, yeah, science, right? And everything we see is purely the result of natural processes apart from the action of any kind of God, and hence science can only allow natural explanations. So these guys actually had a huge impact on universities. They went and effectively altered universities from religious foundations to making them into atheist foundations, right? Atheist institutions. And this is deliberate. So in the late 1920s and 1930s, these materialists formed the humanist societies, and of course humanism pushed atheism, and it pushed the idea, it promoted the idea through propaganda that only by being atheist can you be scientific, that atheism and scientific thinking, rational thinking, are one and the same. Now, of course, this is exactly the same the Soviets did, because they did scientific atheism, and you can only be scientific if you were atheist. If you were Christian, you were irrational. You believed in myths and superstitions. That's what atheists tell us today. Again, how does this differ from communist propaganda? It does not. It's one and the same. Thing is, hating God does not bring someone back from the dead. The hope of Christianity is the resurrection of the dead for those who are saved. Yeah. And Clate says, and he's the one that wrote that he didn't believe in the New Testament. It seems unlikely he'd abandon the Bible God for something else he had no promise from or his daughter that passed away so young. Yeah, it's a question around. But the thing is, Marx inspired. Marx has blood on his hands. Marx has a lot of blood on his hands. Sorry, not Marx. Darwin. Darwin inspired Marx. Darwin inspired the Nazis. Darwin inspired genocides well prior to the Nazis. Darwin went off the rails. So he everything he did enabled atheist genocides. He simply reduced man to just an animal. He reduced man to just matter. He removed God from the equation. He provided for the atheists a creation myth without God. Of course, he spoke of the origin of species. His book is not called The Origin of Life. But atheists will happily tell you Darwin proved how life began. This is absolutely false, but they will still tell you this whole day, every day. And I've had that discussion with various stupid atheists. So, let me continue. So, universities are the propagandistic institutions now, Green Eagles, and that is very true. This is exactly what they intended to do. Educational institutions were meant to become propagandistic. This was the design of the American educational system once the atheists took over the government portion that was administering education. Once they took over the education department, they pushed their atheist propaganda. We will discuss that. I have discussed it in previous shows. I went over that. So, let's see. Yeah. Okay, so Frank, let's just kind of stay on topic. We're not here to have deep theological discussions or dive into DNA too much. Let's just stick on the topic for now. Now, notice Huxley wanted to create the view that science and belief in God were incompatible. Prior to that, science and belief in God were compatible because Christian belief had created the scientific revolution. Now, maybe I should skip this slide because this one is not finished. If I have a slide in blue like this, it means I haven't finished editing it yet. So, yeah, this is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And, so let's skip that. Atheist word games, etymology of atheists. So we'll wind down in a minute. Let me see. I'm at 69. Okay, so I'll wind down in a minute. In ancient Greece, the word for God was theos. If theos meant God, then there would need to be a word that meant the opposite. Now understand, atheism can only be a relevant thing in opposition to something that already exists. If there was no belief in God, if there was no deity, there was no concept of a deity, there was no idea of religion, nothing like that existed, you wouldn't have to be against it, right? You would simply be a-religious, I guess. There would simply be a blank space. But when someone becomes a libertarian, then someone else is going to be against that. They're going to be anti-libertarian. They're going to call themselves a communal person, a communist. When someone's a Republican, you're going to go, we don't like that, we're Democrats, right? So that's a reaction to something. It's not a default position. It's not a first position. The thing didn't exist, so there was no need to describe it. There was no symbol for it because it didn't exist. It didn't need to be described. It wasn't relevant. But, I mean, the oldest architecture in the world is all religious architecture. It's all temples and stuff, right? So, of course, now you've got people who are anti-theist. Atheism is, of course, anti-theistic. We know their words, non-religious. We've got agnostics, but atheists refuse to use those words. They want to be antagonistic to religion. They refuse to be called agnostics. So, anyway, by putting a in front of theos, the word atheos was formed, which means no God. One could say not God. One could say against God. In Greek, a can also mean without, although in this case, no makes more sense. Notice, no God. There is no God. That is a truth claim. This is not saying without God, just a lack of belief. I just don't have a belief. Taken this way, a person that says no God is making a denial of the existence of gods. Any confusion about whether it meant without belief in God, as modern atheists claim, would not have been a consideration at this point in time. It was simply a denial of God's existence. That's the history of it. Atheists refuse to accept this because they don't want, just like Muslims refuse to believe any evidence from their own sources. Now, these two words, theos and atheos, are the root words from where we get theism and atheism. Ism means Greek, ismos, original suffix of action or of state, forming nouns from verbs. Its usage today is a doctrine, a theory, a system. That's in Webster's, and I've gone through this various definitions like this before, but this one's relevant because it tells us theism is a system, a doctrine, a theory, a set of beliefs, a practice. Atheism doesn't somehow not have this apply to it. It is also an ism. Therefore, it is also a practice, a doctrine, a set of beliefs. So again, atheists are just lying through their teeth, denying every and all sources. Okay. At the time theos came into existence, there was no formal doctrine of God. So theism developed sometime later, most likely during the French Enlightenment. This is when the modern form of atheism came into existence. This tracing of the development of a word is also part of etymology. Once more formal doctrines came into being, then the word theism was created. Theos, God, ism, belief or doctrine. Thus, the modern use of the word theism, belief in God. The literal Greek root for theism is theos, atheos, that in modern usage means no or without belief in God. But just like the word theos, God is the root, literal meaning of theism, right? So to atheos, no God is the root word for atheism. That's why when you look in a dictionary or encyclopedia under the word atheism, they'll list the Greek literal meaning as a denial of God. It is not just a lack of belief. It's a denial. It's an active denial. You've come to the conclusion. So atheists are just lying to us. What book is he holding? That's the question, Green Eagles. What book was he pointing at in the photo? I have no idea. That's a good question. I have no idea. It doesn't show. Right. And finally, etymology. So we'll wrap up in a moment. I'm on slide 71 of 81. Yeah, I just answered that, Green Eagles. So let's see. The following are the definitions offered by the two dictionaries of etymology. The word is followed by the accepted literal meaning from the Greek root word. We have the Oxford Dictionary of English Etymology. Atheism, atheos, denying God. Denying, not I just lack belief, I have a blank hole in my head. I deny God. That's the Oxford Dictionary of English Etymology, 1966. And the Etymological Dictionary of the English Language. Atheism, all are coined words from the Greek atheos, denying the gods. Again, an active denial, an active belief. A word introduced into the Latin by Cicero in the form atheos, a negative. So, not a lack of, this is a negation, the contradictory. Prefix, and theos, a god, so not a god. This is the opposite. This is not a god, right? And that's the Etymological Dictionary of English Language, 1958. And let's have a final look. I'll end here. Disbelief defined. Current dictionaries, encyclopedias, and philosophical sources follow the literal meaning when giving the standard usage of the word. Since many of the following definitions use the word disbelief, we need to have a correct definition of that word as well. So, disbelief in God, right? Disbelief, the refusal to believe that something is true. That is an active refusal. It is a verb. It is not just a lack of belief. It is not a psychological state. This is an active term. And disbelief, refusal or reluctance to believe, I won't. This is the American Heritage Dictionary of English, 1996. And that was the Cambridge International Dictionary of English, 1995. So guys, I'll wrap up here. Any comments or questions from you guys? Okay. I'll finish on this slide. Why not? Norman L. Geisler, the Bacon's Encyclopedia of Christian Apologetics. So, while polytheism dominated much of ancient Greek thought, and theism dominated medieval Christian view, atheism had its day in the modern world. Of course, not all who lack faith in a divine being wish to be called atheist. Some prefer the positive ascription of humanist. See humanism, secular. We'll be discussing that next year. In January, I'll be talking about those guys. Others are perhaps best described as materialists. So they're all the same. Marx, Dawkins, Harris are all materialists, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson, materialist. Now, he claims to be agnostic, but he's a materialist, which means he's atheist. Because if you're a materialist, you accept that there is nothing immaterial, therefore there can be no spirit, therefore there is no God. Understand the logic here. But all are non-theists, and most are anti-theistic. Some prefer the more neutral term atheists. In distinction from atheist, who believes God exists beyond, in distinction from a theist who believes God exists beyond and in the world, and a pantheist who believes God is the world, an atheist believes there is no God, either beyond or in the world. There's only a universe, a cosmos, and nothing more. So I'll end here just to repeat the point I've made. These people are all materialists. They claim to be agnostics, but they claim to be materialists. If they're materialists, they deny anything beyond the material. They deny spirit, they deny the immaterial, they deny God. Because God is not material. God is not, the earth. God is not matter. God is immaterial. So this is a contradiction. So this is simply word games that they play, and it's all a lie. So, guys, why did the atheists let the atheists hijack the universities? Because they have a proselytizing religion which is antithetical, directly antithetical, antagonistic to Christian doctrine. They believe they can do better. They can create their own religion. They say Christianity is a man-made religion, but they themselves are a man-made religion. So, yeah, it's funded by the government that theists didn't own them. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll discuss that another time. I have mentioned in previous shows about some of the infiltration and the overturning of the actual Christian basis. The American educational system was originally Christian. If you look at universities like Princeton and others, they were actually Christian universities. Many of them were seminaries. They were founded by seminarians. They were founded by very, very Christian people. And of course, they were taken over and by these atheists who have infected and infested everywhere and everything. And so, guys, I'll leave you here. Merry Christmas. Thank you very much for all the support during the year. I need to attend to the members channel, so I will get onto that next week. I have time off. I can do that. But thank you very much. I wish you all a really blessed celebration. Stay safe. If it's cold and snowing where you are, drive safely. Stay safe with the family. Hope you guys stay healthy. Hope you've learned something. So, yeah, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. And, yeah, I will see you guys in next year. Well, I'll see you guys next week, possibly. I will have some time. He never returned his horses. Thank you, Lloyd. Your studies are a great blessing. As I'm sure others will agree, may the Lord preserve you. And thank you very much to you too. Frank Villard says, Lloyd, I love your work. It's in-depth and incredibly educational. You attack your subject with logic and moral rationality. Thank you. I try to be very factual. I mean, I try to provide the same sources. Everyone can go to the same sources, look them up, and, see for themselves whether what I'm saying is true. So I try to really minimize whatever errors I might make because I'm going directly and showing the sources what the sources say. So thank you, guys. Yeah, and also, I mean, ask yourself, in 3 years, I've invited every Abdul who's ever commented on my shows, to come on and stream with me and let's go through the sources together. Not a single one has accepted, not one. I need to finish this, so next week I'll probably just finish this topic. I have 9 more slides to go, 8 more slides to go. So guys, thank you very much. Enjoy. Have a wonderful Christmas weekend. I will be away for a few days. And till next week, take care. See you all. Bye-bye. Merry Christmas.